When Donald Trump dismissed Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett as just a loudmouth, he didn't realize he'd handed the sharp-tongued Texas lawyer the exact ammunition she needed to dismantle his entire argument on live television. The moment that words left his mouth, the split-screen dynamic on CNN shifted from a political debate into a live execution. Before Crockett even finished her now-famous reply, the internet was already moving. The hashtag legislator not a loudmouth wasn't just trending. It was a global supernova, hitting 1 million mentions in under 10 minutes. In the CNN control room, a producer took his headset off and stared at the monitor, his mouth agape. "Cut to commercial," someone hissed, but nobody moved. They were witnessing a broadcast unicorn, an unscripted moment of pure, undiluted political demolition. News sites that had cross-posted the live feed began to lag, their servers overwhelmed by a tidal wave of traffic. On Twitter, now X, the clip was being cut, captioned, and replayed in a frantic, self-perpetuating loop. It wasn't just another political spat. It was a changing of the guard, a masterclass in precision against brute force, and it was happening. Live, for the entire world to see, 40-8 hours earlier. The air in Erie, Pennsylvania, was thick with the smell of hot dogs and the sound of Lee Greenwood. Donald Trump stood on a stage, bathed in the adulation of 20,000 people, a sea of red hats stretching back to the parking lot. He was invincible. He riffed on his familiar themes: the rigged election, the failing economy, the weakness of his enemies. Backstage, in a cramped trailer reeking of stale coffee, his campaign manager, a perpetually stressed man named Gary, tried to prep him for the next day's CNN interview. "Jasmine Crockett will be on the split screen, sir," Gary said, holding up a tablet with her picture. Trump glanced at it for less than a second before waving his hand dismissively. "Another one. All they do is talk loud. Very, very loud." He turned back to the mirror, adjusting his tie. "She's a nobody, a loudmouth. Don't worry about it, Gary. The people know. They know who's strong and who's just making noise. It'll be easy. We'll get great ratings." There was no briefing book, no discussion of policy or legal specifics. The plan, as always, was for Trump to be Trump. He saw the interview not as a forum for ideas, but as another stage. And Jasmine Crockett was just an opening act he had to talk over. Almost 500 miles away, in a quiet Washington, D.C. office, the lights were still on. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett sat at a large mahogany table. A stack of legal briefs and congressional reports fanned out before her. Her chief of staff, Shonda McKinley, a woman who moved with the quiet efficiency of a battlefield nurse, pointed to a line in a document. "This is the statute he doesn't understand," Shonda said. "He thinks it's about intent. It's about action." She leaned back, chewing on the end of her pen. "You know what he's going to do, Jasmine. He's not going to debate you on the merits of this. He's going to come after you. He'll call you a name. He'll try to get under your skin, make you emotional." Crockett looked up from the page, her eyes clear and focused. She took a slow sip of cold tea from a mug. "That's his only move when he's cornered," she said, her voice even. "He wants a food fight. He wants it to be a spectacle, a circus. I'm not giving it to him." She tapped the legal brief with her index finger. "I'm not going on CNN to trade insults with a former president. I'm going there to talk about the law. I'm going to talk about the facts. That's the job. That's the only reason to do this." Shonda watched her for a moment, then nodded. There was no anxiety in the room, only preparation. Crockett wasn't getting ready for a fight. She was getting ready for a class, and she was the one who would be doing the teaching. She knew the battlefield she was stepping onto was designed to be a gladiator pit, but she had no intention of picking up a sword. She was bringing the law. The studio lights were hot, but Jasmine Crockett felt a familiar calm settle over her. A young technician, trying to look important, fumbled with her earpiece. "Just check the level, ma'am. We've got Mr. Trump patched in from his rally site in Erie. We'll be live after this break." She nodded, her face a mask of placid concentration. She could hear the faint, muffled roar of a crowd through the connection, a ghost in the machine. On the monitor in front of her, the screen split. On the right was her composed in a sharp cobalt blue blazer. On the left was Donald Trump. He was smirking, leaning into the camera, his shoulders filling the frame. He looked like a man who owned the world and was about to foreclose on a noisy tenant. "Welcome back," said the anchor, Tom Donovan, a man with a face made for television and a voice that could soothe a nervous market. We're joined now by President Donald Trump and by Texas Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. Mr. Trump, let's start with you. The latest job numbers. Trump launched into his stump speech, a torrent of grievances and self-aggrandizement. He talked about the Trump economy as if it were a lost Eden. When Tom turned to Crockett, the shift in tone was jarring. Congresswoman, your response. She didn't look at Trump's image on the monitor. She looked directly into her own camera lens as if speaking to a single person sitting in their living room. Thank you, Tom, she began, her voice measured and clear. The reality is, the numbers don't support the former president's narrative. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics report from last quarter, wage growth has actually outpaced inflation. For the first time in 18 months, a trend that began. She was precise, she was factual. She was, to Donald Trump, infuriatingly boring. Tom Donovan, sensing the need to ignite the segment, pivoted. Mr. Trump, I want to turn to the recent superseding indictment in the Southern District of Florida. Prosecutors allege, ... Trump cut him off before he could finish the question. A witch hunt? It's a disgrace. A Biden-led witch hunt to interfere with the election. They're weaponizing the Justice Department like in a third world country. It's a scam. Everybody knows it. He was yelling now, gesticulating at his camera, his face turning a shade of magenta. Tom tried to interject, but it was like trying to stop a freight train with a feather. Finally, the storm subsided. Tom turned to his other guest, a look of desperation in his eyes. Congresswoman Crockett, you are a member of the House Oversight Committee, and you have a background as a public defender and civil rights attorney. What is your legal take on the evidence that has been presented to the public? This was the moment. The door had been opened. Crockett took a small, almost imperceptible breath. Thank you, Tom. I'd like to set aside the political rhetoric and look at the indictment itself, specifically the charges related to the Espionage Act. Trump's face on the monitor contorted. He started shaking his head, mouthing the word wrong. Crockett continued, unperturbed. This isn't about whether a president has the authority to declassify documents. The statute in question, 18 U.S. Code Section 793, doesn't even mention classification. It pertains to the unlawful retention of national defense information. The core of the government's case, as outlined in the indictment, rests on two simple points. 1. Did the defendant have unauthorized possession of these documents? And 2. Did he willfully retain them? She spoke like a law professor, laying out the foundation of an argument, piece by piece. Trump could not stand it. He was a man who operated on instinct, on dominance, on sheer force of personality. He was being methodically dissected by someone who refused to engage him on his terms. Wrong, he boomed, his voice crackling with distortion. She doesn't know what she's talking about. She's just reading talking points from the crooked Doge. It's all fake. Tom Donovan tried to regain control. Mr. Trump, please let the Congresswoman finish her point. She hasn't interrupted you. But Trump was beyond listening. He saw an opponent who wasn't fighting back in the way he understood. She wasn't shouting. She wasn't insulting him. She was ignoring him. She was treating him as a legal case study, a problem to be analyzed, and it drove him into a frenzy. Crockett waited patiently for his outburst to sputter out. She didn't roll her eyes. She didn't sigh. She simply held her space, her calm a stark contrast to his flailing rage. When there was a brief pause, she leaned forward slightly. As I was saying, Tom, the issue at hand isn't about opinion. It's about the documented evidence. For instance, Statute 18, Section 1512, which deals with obstruction of justice, is particularly damning. The indictment alleges specific actions like directing staff to move boxes to conceal them from investigators that constitute a textbook case of obstruction. It's not ambiguous. Her use of the phrase textbook case seemed to be the final trigger. It was academic, it was dismissive, it was, in his mind, the ultimate insult. He was no longer a former president. He was a defendant, being lectured. He pointed a finger at his camera, his face a mask of pure fury. See, this is what they do. They get these people, these horrible, nasty people, and they just talk and talk. She's just a loudmouth. That's all she is. A loudmouth from Texas, who doesn't know anything. He leaned in closer, his voice dripping with condescension. Why don't you be quiet for a minute? Let the men talk." The control room went silent. Tom Donovan's jaw was slack. He had lost control of his own show. The insult hung in the air, a grenade with the pin pulled. It was personal, it was misogynistic, and it was, he thought, the fatal mistake he had been waiting for her to make. He assumed she would react, that she would finally break her composure and start shouting, giving him the brawl he so desperately wanted. But Jasmine Crockett did not shout. She didn't even flinch. She let his words land and evaporate in the silent space between their two screens. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched the corner of her lips. It was not a smile of amusement, but of recognition. He had walked directly into her trap, a trap she hadn't even set. He had built it himself and activated it with his own words. She waited 1 beat, 2 beats, letting his crude insult echo in the vacuum. Then she looked straight into the camera lens, her eyes like chips of flint. The entire digital world leaned in. "She had the floor," she began, her voice dropping a half octave, acquiring a new weight, a new gravity. "Mr. Trump," she said, the words cutting through the electronic hum. "I'm not a loudmouth." She paused, letting the first part of the rebuttal sink in. "I'm a legislator." Another pause. "A member of the United States Congress, elected by the people of the 30th District of Texas. And while you and your legal team seem to be very focused on my volume, I'm focused on the facts of the laws you broke." She leaned forward, her gaze unwavering, her voice sharp as a scalpel. "You mentioned the Espionage Act. You mentioned obstruction. You seem to believe that by yelling witch hunt, the facts disappear. But they don't. They're written down. In indictments, in evidence logs, in witness testimony." She picked up a piece of paper from her desk, but didn't look at it. She already knew what it said. "So let's talk about those, shall we? Let's talk about the 31 documents related to national defense information found in your desk. Let's talk about the audio recording where you admit you have a classified document that you did not declassify. Let's talk about your lawyer, Evan, Corcoran's notes. Or would you rather we just stick to the name-calling?" The silence that followed was different. It wasn't the dead air of a technical glitch. It was the profound, deafening silence of a knockout. Trump was frozen, his mouth slightly open. He had no response. The smirk was gone, replaced by a blank, stunned expression. He had thrown his best punch, a blow designed to demean and diminish, and she had caught it in midair, disassembled it, and handed it back to him in pieces. In the control room, Tom Donovan finally found his voice. We have to take a break," he stammered. The screen went black, but the story was just beginning. The moment the broadcast cut to a commercial for a reverse mortgage, the CNN control room exploded. What the hell was that? The executive producer, a man named Mark, shouted into his headset. "Someone get Trump back. Does he have a handler? Talk to the handler." On the split-screen monitor, now off-air, Crockett's feed showed her sitting perfectly still, hands folded on the desk in front of her. The feed from Erie, however, was pure chaos. The camera was shaking as Donald Trump ripped his microphone from his jacket and threw it on the floor. His voice, now just a muffled roar, could be heard yelling at his aide. "Who the hell is that? You told me she was a nobody. Get me out of this. This is a setup." Gary, his campaign manager, could be seen trying to placate him, his hands up in a gesture of surrender. Then, Trump lunged for the camera, and the screen went to a jarring blue dot in Crockett's ear. Shonda's voice was a whisper of ice. "Stay exactly where you are. Don't move a muscle. You have him. Let him run. The empty chair is more powerful than anything you could say." Jasmine didn't reply. She took another slow sip of her nice cold tea. She looked at the blue screen where the former president had been, her expression unchanging. She had come for a debate on the law, and, in a way, she had gotten one. The defendant had fled the courtroom. The commercial break felt like an eternity. When the show came back, Tom Donovan looked like he had aged a decade. His professional veneer was cracked. "Welcome back," he said, his voice strained. It appears we have lost the connection with President Donald Trump from his event in Erie." He shuffled his papers, avoiding looking directly into the camera. He turned to Crockett, the sole occupant of the screen. "Congresswoman," he said, his voice pleading for her to save the segment, "you have the floor." Jasmine Crockett did not gloat. She did not spike the football. She saw the opening not as a chance to celebrate a victory, but as an opportunity to finish her job. "Thank you, Tom," she said, her tone as even as it was before the break. "Since the former president is no longer with us, perhaps this is a good moment to clarify for your viewers what the obstruction charge truly entails, without the political noise." For the next 5 minutes, uninterrupted, she did just that. She laid out the legal framework for obstruction of justice, as if she were speaking to a first-year law class. She explained the concept of corrupt intent using simple, powerful analogies. "Imagine you have a book that's overdue from the library," she explained. The librarian asks for it back. If you tell your friend to hide the book in the basement so the librarian can't find it, it doesn't matter if you think the library's rules are unfair. You've obstructed. You've taken a deliberate action to impede an official proceeding. The law is very clear on this. She connected each point back to the specific allegations detailed in the public indictment, transforming the abstract legal language into a clear, compelling narrative of alleged wrongdoing. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't use inflammatory adjectives. She used the facts of the indictment as her only weapon. It was no longer a political debate. It was a public service announcement on the rule of law. When Tom Donovan finally wrapped the segment, his gratitude was palpable. "Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, thank you. Thank you for your time and your clarity." The interview was over. The firestorm was just beginning by the time Crockett stepped out of the CNN. Building in Washington and into the waiting black sedan, the world had already changed. Her phone, which she had left with an aide, was physically hot to the touch, a vibrating, glowing brick of pure digital chaos. #LegislatorNotIt was the #1 trend in 74 countries. On TikTok, a 15-year-old girl in Ohio had already created a viral dance set to a remixed beat of Crockett's words. On Instagram, graphic designers were posting stylized images of her face with the, quote, "While you're focused on volume, I'm focused on the law," set in bold, elegant fonts. Memes were spreading like wildfire. Crockett's calm face photoshopped onto the body of a surgeon performing a delicate operation, a chess master checkmating a crying king, a lion tamer with her foot on a chair while a large orange-maned lion cowered in the corner. Pundits on every network, from MSNBC to Fox News, were replaying the clip, their panels dissecting every second of the exchange. On Fox, the host tried to spin it as Crockett being disrespectful and arrogant, but the visual evidence was too damning. The empty blue screen, where Trump had been told a story no spin could erase. He had run. On MSNBC, a former federal prosecutor was almost giddy. "This is what happens when a trial lawyer meets a bully," he said. "Bullies are only effective when they can scare you." She wasn't scared. She brought a briefcase full of facts to a knife fight. News alerts pinged across millions of phones with headlines like "Crockett silences," "Trump in fiery CNN debate," and the moment a Texas lawyer became a Democratic superstar inside the car. Jasmine leaned her head back against the cool leather of the headrest and closed her eyes. The adrenaline that had sharpened her focus in the studio was draining away, leaving a profound, bone-deep exhaustion in its place. She didn't want to look at her phone. She didn't want to see the praise or the analysis. She just wanted silence. "Can you just drive for a little while?" she asked the driver, a large, stoic man who just nodded in the rearview mirror. As the car moved through the streets of D.C., the weight of the moment began to settle on her shoulders. This wasn't just a good interview. It was a declaration of war. She had not just challenged a political opponent, she had publicly humiliated a man who built his entire identity on the projection of unbeatable strength. The victory was exhilarating, but the consequences, she knew, would be severe. Back in her office, the phones began to ring, and they didn't stop. But these were not calls from well-wishers. The first voicemail was a man screaming, his voice thick with rage, calling her every racist and sexist slur imaginable, ending with, "We know where you live." The second was just heavy breathing, followed by a whispered, "You're going to pay for that." The office email inbox, monitored by her staff, was a digital sewer, a torrent of death threats, images of nooses, and vile conspiracy theories. Her social media mentions, once a mix of constituent concerns and political debate, had become a toxic waste dump. Shonda was already on a conference call with the head of the Capitol Police. "No, I'm not asking. I'm telling you, Shonda said, her voice low and firm. The detail needs to be 24/7, starting now. Full protective detail. Home, office, everywhere. I'm sending you the first 100 emails now. In the back of the sedan, circling the Lincoln Memorial. Jasmine finally scrolled through her call log, bypassing the hundreds of calls from reporters, producers, and politicians. She found the one number she was looking for and pressed the screen. It rang twice. Hello! The voice on the other end was warm, familiar, and laced with the unmistakable accent of East Texas. Mama, Jasmine said, and the single word carried all the exhaustion she felt. Jasmine, baby, I saw it, her mother, Eleanor Crockett, said. Her voice was a mixture of fierce pride and palpable fear. Lord, you were brilliant. You stood your ground, and you didn't let that man run over you. You made me so proud. There was a pause. But, Jasmine, ... are you safe? I saw what he called you. The things these people say online, ... it scares me to death. Jasmine closed her eyes, picturing her mother in her small house in Dallas, sitting in her favorite armchair, the television still glowing in the background. She tried to keep her own voice steady, to project a calm she didn't entirely feel. I'm okay, Mama. I'm safe. I have security. They're with me right now. You shouldn't have to have security just for speaking the truth on television, Eleanor said, her voice trembling slightly. This isn't the world I thought we were building. I know, Mama, Jasmine whispered, but it's the world we've got, and we can't let them scare us into silence. That's what they want, I know, Eleanor said, sighing. You just be careful. You hear me. You call me every day. I will, Mama, I promise. She ended the call and stared out the window at the marble of the monument to Abraham Lincoln. She had one. The entire world was telling her she had one. But in the quiet darkness of the car, all she could feel was the weight of the fight to come. The following day, the political world struggled to find its footing on a landscape that had been seismically altered. Donald Trump's campaign, reeling, went into a furious damage control mode that involved attacking everything in sight. At 7 a.m., a press release hit reporters' inboxes, its tone a mix of belligerence and victimhood. It called the CNN interview a disgraceful, biased ambush, accusing the network of colluding with the radical left and claiming Congresswoman Crockett was a pre-programmed puppet of the Biden DOJ. It was a declaration that they would not engage with the reality of what had occurred. Then came the storm from the man himself. On Truth Social, Trump unleashed a torrent of posts, each more frantic than the last. The ratings for crazy CNN are in the toilet, so they have to pull these kinds of stunts. He wrote at 7:15, I decided to leave the interview because it was boring and unfair. The loudmouth congresswoman didn't know what she was talking about, just reading from a script. Sad, at 7:30, he posted a manipulated photo of Crockett with clown makeup on. At 8 o'clock, he insisted, I won that interview by a lot. Everyone is saying it. I left because I have more important things to do than listen to a lie-Q individual lie about me and our great country. He was attempting to construct an alternate reality for his followers, one in which he hadn't been routed but had made a powerful choice to walk away from an unworthy opponent. The Republican establishment reacted with a telling mix of frantic support and deafening silence. His most ardent loyalists in Congress dutifully echoed his talking points. President Trump was right to walk out, one senator from Alabama told a scrum of reporters. CNN is fake news, and he shouldn't be subjected to the rants of a leftist, dementia. But from the party's more traditional wing, there was nothing. The Senate Minority Leader, when asked for his reaction, suddenly became fascinated by a piece of lint on his jacket and muttered, I was in meetings all day. I didn't see it. The Speaker of the House claimed he was focused on the budget. Their silence was a confession. They had watched the same clip as everyone else and knew that defending Trump's performance was impossible. They couldn't condone his behavior, but they were too terrified of his base to condemn it. On the Democratic side, the mood was electric. The Democratic National Committee had a fundraising email out by sunrise. The subject line, a simple, powerful legislator, not a loudmouth. It featured a link to the clip and a plea. Jasmine Crockett showed the world what it means to stand up to a bully with grace and facts. Rush in $10 now to help us elect more leaders like her. The email shattered their internal fundraising records for a 24-hour period. The party leadership, from the White House to Capitol Hill, showered Crockett with praise. The Senate Majority Leader tweeted that her performance was a masterclass in dignity and intellect, while the Speaker of the House hailed her grace under fire. The political machine had seized upon the moment, recognizing its power not just as a morale boost, but as a potent tool for mobilization and fundraising. In Crockett's office, which now had a discreet but unmistakable Capitol Police officer sitting on a chair just outside the main door, the atmosphere was a study in controlled chaos. The phones rang incessantly. Shonda managed a whiteboard where she triaged the media requests. The list was a who's who of American media: Good Morning America, The Today Show, The View, 60 Minutes, every major podcast, and even an inquiry from the BBC. Shonda, a pragmatist to her core, argued for a victory lap. "You have to go on GMA," she urged, pointing at the board with a dry erase marker. "You can define this narrative for a national morning audience. Cement the win, Jasmine. Don't let them forget." Jasmine, however, was resolute. She stood by the window, looking down at the stream of tourists on the street below. "No," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "That's his move. That's what he would do. He'd go on a friendly network and brag. This was never about me getting a win. It was about the principle of the matter." She turned to face her staff, who had gathered in the room. "I made the point I needed to make on a platform where he couldn't hide. Going on a talk show tour now only cheapens it. It makes it about celebrity, not about the rule of law." She pointed to the whiteboard. "Decline all of them politely." Shonda looked like she was about to argue, but Jasmine raised a hand. "Let the clip do the work. Let his silence and his empty chair do the work." She gave her communications director a specific instruction. "The only thing our office should be pushing out are the educational parts of the interview. The explanation of the obstruction statute, the breakdown of the Espionage Act. I want people to learn something, not just watch a gladiator match." Her strategy was one of radical restraint. In a political culture that demanded constant noise, she chose silence, confident that the truth of the moment was powerful enough to resonate on its own. For 2 days, the narrative churned along these predictable partisan lines. Trump's supporters consumed the narrative of a biased media and a heroic president walking out of an ambush. Democrats and independents celebrated the takedown of a bully. The news cycle was beginning to move on, as it always does. Then, on Wednesday morning, the entire conversation was appended from a source so unexpected it caught everyone by surprise. Judge Harrison Thorne was a titan of the conservative legal world. At 75 years old, he was a former appellate court judge appointed by Ronald Reagan, a senior fellow at a deeply conservative think tank, and a man whose intellectual honesty was so fierce that even his ideological opponents respected him. He was, by all measures, the last person anyone would expect to weigh in on behalf of Jasmine Crockett. His op-ed appeared on the front page of the Journal's website. Under a stark, 6-word headline, there was no debate, only a lecture. The article was a masterpiece of legal and rhetorical demolition. It did not attack Donald Trump's politics. It attacked his abandonment of reason. "Last night, I watched what was purported to be a political debate on CNN," Thorne began. "It was nothing of the sort. What I witnessed was a sitting Congresswoman, Ms. Crockett, attempting to engage in a serious discussion about the rule of law, and a former president who was either unable or unwilling to participate in that conversation." He methodically praised Crockett's performance, not for its political cleverness, but for its intellectual rigor. Congresswoman Crockett did not trade insults. She did not engage in hyperbole. She came armed with a stunning command of the facts, of the indictment, and a precise understanding of the relevant legal statutes. Her demeanor was that of a seasoned trial lawyer presenting a case to a jury, methodical and devastatingly effective. Then Thorne turned his focus to Trump, and his critique was withering precisely because it was so devoid of political passion. Mr. Trump's response was not a rebuttal, he wrote. It was a retreat from the entire project of civil discourse. His tactic to shout, to insult, to demean is the last refuge of a man who has no argument to make. His description of the Congresswoman as a loudmouth was not merely a personal slight. It was a confession of his own intellectual bankruptcy in that moment. The judge went on to explain why all conservatives should be deeply troubled by the exchange. For decades, conservatives have argued that we are the party of law and order, of institutional integrity, and of reasoned debate. What transpired on that screen was a grotesque mockery of those principles. The former president did not only show disrespect for his opponent, he showed a profound contempt for the law itself, treating a federal indictment not as a serious legal matter to be answered, but as a public relations problem to be shouted down. He concluded with a chilling warning. When a political leader abandons reason for rhetoric and facts for fury, he asks his followers to do the same. This is not the path of conservatism. It is the path to ruin. The empty chair Mr. Trump left behind was a symbol of the intellectual void he now occupies. The impact of the op-ed was instantaneous and profound. It was like a dam breaking suddenly. It was no longer a simple partisan story. Judge Thorne, a pillar of the conservative legal establishment, had granted permission for mainstream Republicans and conservatives to criticize Trump's behavior without fear of being labeled a rhino. The narrative shifted overnight. The story was no longer about a Democrat owning a Republican. It was about a legislator upholding the principles of law against a leader who appeared to hold them in contempt. News segments were now framed around Thorne's article. A conservative reckoning, asked one CNN chyron. Journalists who had been hesitant to call Trump's actions a meltdown now felt emboldened, citing Thorne's intellectual bankruptcy framing. The conversation had been elevated, lifted from the muck of partisan bickering onto the very ground Crockett had chosen from the start. The high, firm ground of the law, the unexpected ally, had not just changed the debate. He had validated the entire strategy, proving that in the end, clarity could be more powerful than chaos. Judge Thorne's column acted as a catalyst, transforming the chemical composition of the news cycle. The story was no longer just about a political skirmish. It was about a fundamental crisis in public discourse. The flood of media requests to Crockett's office only intensified, but now they were different. The tone had shifted from sensational to serious. Producers no longer asked for a fiery rebuttal, but for her perspective on the state of political rhetoric. She was no longer being invited to a fight, but to a symposium. Still, she declined. She held to her strategy of restraint, letting Thorne's words and the original clip continue their work. Then, an invitation arrived that was different from all the others. It wasn't from a network with millions of viewers or a podcast with a global reach. It was an email from the dean of her own alma mater, the University of Houston Law Center. The subject line was simple: a conversation with our students. The dean wrote that the students and faculty had been following the events with intense interest and asked if she would be willing to come to campus for a town hall discussion. The proposed topic was the role of law in modern political discourse. She brought the email to Jasmine, her eyes bright with excitement. "This is it," she said. "This is the one. It's not partisan. It's substantive. It's on your home turf at your own law school. You control the entire environment." Jasmine read the email, and a genuine smile spread across her face for the first time in days. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "This is the one. Tell them yes." This was the platform she had been waiting for, a forum where she could have a serious conversation, not a performance. It was a return to first principles, a chance to speak to the next generation of lawyers about the ideas she had sought to defend on that chaotic split screen. A week later, she walked onto the stage of the Crossed Auditorium at the Law Center. The room was packed, with students filling every seat, sitting in the aisles, and standing along the back walls. The university was live streaming the event, but per Crockett's request, no external news cameras were permitted. She wanted it to be a conversation, not a media event. After a glowing introduction from the dean, she stepped to the podium. A profound quiet fell over the room. She looked out at the sea of young, eager faces, the future lawyers, judges, and legislators of America. She did not mention Donald Trump by name. She did not rehash the insults or the chaos of the interview. Instead, she offered a diagnosis of a sickness in the body politic and a prescription for the cure. "Good afternoon," she began, her voice calm and resonant in the hushed hall. "It is an honor to be back here. In these classrooms, I learned that the law is more than a set of rules. It's a system of reasoning. It's a framework for finding the truth. And right now, in our country, That framework is under assault. She paused, letting the words settle. There is a dangerous idea being pushed in our civic life. It's the idea that the loudest voice is the truest voice. That conviction is measured in decibels. That if you yell the words hoax or witch hunt or fake news enough times, the facts themselves will simply wither and die under the sheer force of the noise. But the law doesn't work that way, she continued, her cadence becoming more forceful. And the truth doesn't work that way. The truth is not loud. The truth is clear. It is precise. It is relentless. It doesn't need to scream because it has the weight of reality on its side. A fact can be whispered, and it is still a fact. A lie can be bellowed from the largest stage in the world, and it is still a lie. The students were motionless, hanging on every word. A few nights ago, I was in a situation where I was invited to a debate, but I found myself in the middle of an attempted brawl. I was presented with a choice. Do I join the brawl, trade insult for insult, and contribute to the noise? Or do I hold my ground, refuse to be dragged into the mud, and insist on a conversation based on reason and evidence? She leaned into the microphone. My refusal to engage in a shouting match wasn't a tactic. It wasn't a strategy to go viral. It was a testament to my faith in the very principles this institution teaches, that a well-reasoned argument is more powerful than a baseless accusation, that evidence is more compelling than emotion, and that our duty as officers of the court and as citizens is not to win every shouting match, but to uphold the integrity of the conversation itself. Because when we lose that, we lose everything. Then she delivered the lines that would define the entire episode, the words that would be quoted and analyzed for years to come. They wanted a brawl, but I offered a briefing. They wanted a reality show, but I insisted on reality. I did not go on television to defeat an opponent. I went to defend an idea. And that idea is simple, that in the United States of America, the law is still supposed to matter more than the man. A wave of applause erupted, a thunderous, rolling ovation that was less a celebration and more a profound affirmation. It wasn't the fleeting virality of a meme. It was the deep, resonant virality of an idea whose time had come. The transcript of the speech was online before she even left the stage. Law professors across the country began assigning it to their students. Columnists wrote not about the political victory, but about the speech's powerful defense of Enlightenment values. Jasmine Crockett had done more than win a news cycle. She had penned a defining text for a nation struggling to remember the difference between noise and news, between volume and veracity. Miles away, and a week later, in a classroom in suburban Michigan, Mr. David Chen stared at the faces of his 11th grade civics students. For months, he had felt a rising tide of despair. His students were bright, but they were deeply, corrosively cynical. To them, politics was a joke, a WWE-style performance where both sides were lying. And the only goal was to get the most retweets. They consumed political news like junk food, looking for the sickest burns and the most epic takedowns. The concept of objective truth felt like a quaint black-and-white relic from a world they didn't recognize. He had shown them the initial CNN clip, and their reaction had been exactly what he feared. "Oh damn, she wrecked him." One student had yelled, "Total savage mode." Another had said, already texting the clip to a friend, they saw the spectacle, but they missed the substance entirely. They saw the knockout, but they didn't understand the science behind the punch. David felt like he was failing them, failing to teach them how to be discerning citizens in an age of information warfare. That weekend, he stumbled upon the video of Crockett's speech at the University of Houston. He watched it once, then twice, then a third time. It was like a splash of cold water. She had articulated the very thing he had been struggling to convey to his students. An idea formed in his mind. The next Monday morning, he scrapped his planned lesson on the committee system of Congress. As the students filed in, they saw two quotes projected on the whiteboard at the front of the room. On the left, from Donald Trump's Truth Social account, were the words, "I won that interview by a lot. Everyone is saying it." On the right, from Jasmine Crockett's speech, were the words, "The truth is not loud. The truth is clear." David Chen didn't say a word. He just played the two clips back to back. First, the chaotic, insult-laden CNN confrontation, ending with Trump's empty blue screen. Then, the quiet, focused speech Crockett gave at the university. When it was over, he turned to the class. The usual din of chatter was absent. The room was quiet. He posed a single question. "Which one of these people is trying to win an argument?" he asked. "And which one is trying to make one? And what, exactly, is the difference?" For the first time all semester, a real debate broke out. Students weren't just reacting, they were thinking. They talked about the difference between assertion and evidence, between attacking a person and attacking an idea. Then a student named Maya, usually the most cynical and withdrawn member of the class, raised her hand. "I get it now," she said slowly, surprising everyone, including herself. "Trump is trying to win the moment. Like he wants to be the one who looks strongest on the screen for that 1 second. But she was trying to win the argument, like the actual idea, not just the TV show. She was playing the long game." David Chen felt a feeling he hadn't felt in a long time, a flicker of hope. The echo of that one televised moment, filtered through the clarity of a second, quieter moment, had traveled hundreds of miles and landed in his classroom. It had, for at least one student, on one Monday morning, made a difference. The conversation in David Chen's classroom continued raw and unfiltered. A student named Kevin, who idolized online provocateurs, jumped in to challenge Maya. "But doesn't winning the moment matter more now? Seriously, who cares about the long game if you lose the election? Trump has millions of followers who believe him. Crockett has. Who? Law professors. My dad says politics is war, and you have to be willing to fight dirty." "But is that all it is?" Maya shot back, her voice gaining confidence. "Just a war. So we're supposed to just give up on trying to figure out what's true." Her whole point was that you don't have to fight dirty if you're right. You just have to be clear. David Chen let them debate, gently guiding the conversation. "Let's think. About that, Kevin, what is the ultimate goal of political discourse? Is it just about acquiring power for your side, no matter the cost? Or is it about trying to build a consensus around a shared set of facts to solve problems?" He saw a flicker of genuine contemplation in Kevin's eyes. The student had no easy answer. For the rest of the period, the class engaged in the most substantive, challenging conversation of the year. They argued about the media's role, the nature of truth in the social media age, and the responsibilities of a citizen. When the bell rang, its shrill sound was an unwelcome intrusion. As the students packed their bags, they were still talking about it. The argument spilled out into the hallway, a passionate, messy, and wonderfully real debate. That afternoon, long after the last student had gone, David sat at his desk and typed out an email. He sent it to the general contact address on Congresswoman Crockett's official website, knowing it would likely be read by a junior staffer, if at all. He didn't ask for anything. He simply wanted to bear witness. "Dear Congresswoman Crockett," he wrote, "I am a high school civics teacher in Michigan. I am writing to thank you. In a political environment that has made my students deeply cynical, your actions on CNN and your subsequent speech on the nature of truth provided a moment of profound clarity. You gave me the tools to teach them the vital difference between making an argument and simply winning one. For the first time this year, I saw my students engage with our country's problems, not as a joke, but as a serious challenge they have a stake in solving. Your work in Washington is important, but I wanted you to know that your example has had a real and lasting echo here, hundreds of miles away." He clicked send and leaned back in his chair, feeling a sense of closure. He had closed the circuit, connecting the public act to its private, meaningful impact. A month after the interview, the world had spun on. Donald Trump was at a rally in North Carolina, standing on another stage, bathed in the same lights, shouting to another massive crowd. He was still defiant, still enraged. "They sent a nasty woman, a real loudmouth, to attack me on live TV," he yelled, hitting the familiar cadence. But this time, the roar from the crowd was a little less immediate, a fraction less ferocious. The insult, which had once seemed like a display of dominance, now carried a faint echo of his on-air retreat. The story of him fleeing the debate had seeped into the culture, a small but persistent crack in the armor of his invincibility. It hadn't defeated him, but it had defined him in a way he couldn't control. The man who prided himself on never backing down was now, in the minds of many, the man who had run from a fight with a woman armed only with the facts. He had to yell a little louder now, his grievances a little more shrill. to generate the same intoxicating rage that had once come so easily. The final scene of the saga did not take place under the hot lights of a television studio or in the hallowed halls of a university. Site_start. It unfolded on a Tuesday evening in a small, stuffy community center in the Oak Cliff neighborhood of Dallas. Site 5566. The paint was peeling on the walls, and the folding chairs were arranged in uneven rows. There were no national media cameras, no celebrity moderators. There was just Jasmine Crockett, a microphone, and about 100 of her constituents. She was holding a town hall on voter registration and the upcoming local elections. It was the unglamorous, grinding, essential work of a representative. She spoke about polling locations, new voter ID laws, and the importance of school board elections. Then she opened the floor to questions. A dozen hands went up. She answered questions about Social Security, infrastructure funding, and a broken traffic light at a nearby intersection. Then, a young woman in the back of the room stood up. She looked to be in her early 20s, and she held her phone in her hand as if for courage. "Congresswoman Crockett," she began, her voice nervous but clear. "My name is Maria. I don't really follow politics that much. It always just seemed like a lot of angry people yelling. But I saw you on the news last month. My whole family watched it. And then my abuela, my grandmother, she made us all sit down and watch the speech you gave to the law students." Maria took a breath. "You talked about the law and the truth, like it wasn't some complicated thing for important people. You made it sound like it belonged to us, too, that it was our tool to use. I just wanted to say, after we saw you, my mom, my tios, and Miwi all went online and registered to vote for the first time. So I guess I don't really have a question. I just wanted to say thank you." Jasmine Crockett looked at the young woman, and a warmth spread through her chest that no amount of viral fame could ever replicate. This was it. This was the win. Wasn't the empty blue screen on CNN? It wasn't the fawning headlines or Judge Thorne's validation. It was this moment, in this stuffy room, far from the centers of power. The true victory wasn't in silencing a bully, but in awakening the voice of a citizen. It wasn't about her performance. It was about their participation. She smiled at Maria, a genuine, unguarded smile. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with an emotion that had nothing to do with anger or drama. "Thank you for sharing that. That means more to me than you could ever know." As she wrapped up the town hall and thanked everyone for coming, she reflected on the chaotic whirlwind of the past month. She had been called a star, a hero, a villain, and a loudmouth, but she knew the truth was simpler. She was a legislator who had chosen to do her job. She had walked onto a battlefield designed for a brawl, but had insisted on holding a briefing instead. In the end, she realized the real power wasn't in the decibels of the debate, but in the quiet resonance of the truth. It was in the flicker of understanding in a cynical student's eyes, in the proud and fearful voice of a mother, and in the newfound civic purpose of a family in her district. The goal was never to walk away from a fight. The goal was to walk toward a better argument, and to bring as many people along with her as she could. What does it truly mean to be strong in the face of baseless attacks? Is it to shout back louder, or to stand firm in the quiet power of the truth? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and if you believe in the power of clear, honest leadership, subscribe for more real stories about the people fighting for it.